I will call to order the Finance Building and Grounds Committee meeting, which was duly noticed on February 14th, 2025, through posted notification of press in accordance with Wisconsin Statute 19.84. When I read March 14th, it just makes me want to pause for a long time, being Pi Day, but that's math geek, so anyway. Safety message. So does anybody happen to know what Prevention Week this is?
No, I don't think so.
So one of the things I learned is most weeks, they have a National Prevention of Something Week. Well, this one is National Poison Prevention Week.
Oh, wow.
And this is a vital reminder to safeguard our homes and loved ones from accidental poisoning. Here are a few essential tips to keep in mind. Keep medicines, cleaning products, and chemicals in their original containers and out of the reach of children. Use child-resistant packaging and secure cabinets with safety locks. Always read and follow the instructions on medicine and product labels. Never mix household chemicals. It can create dangerous fumes. And be prepared. Save the Poison Help Hotline, which is 800-222-1222. So kind of easy to remember. Know the signs of poisoning, whether it's nausea, vomiting, confusion, or breathing difficulty. Let's not just assume it's our age while we're doing some of those things. In case of exposure, call for help immediately. And in the area of educate and share, teach children about dangers of poisonous substances. Share poison prevention tips with friends and family. So always, once again, know where we're at, know what we're doing, know how not to put ourselves in harm. So, thank you. Anyone else? Add? No spring cleaning yet there? All right.
Start.
Is there a motion to adopt the March 18th, 2025 Finance Buildings and Grounds agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next up, presentation of the fiscal year 24-25 year-to-date through February financial summaries and consider approval to move to the full board. Mr. McCray.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Ardrey. I hope the rest of the meeting goes well because my preparation for this meeting, and Ms. Jensen can attest to it, has been a little bit of a rocky road. So, but I believe we have everything, and moving into this agenda item, as we typically share with you, we have both the revenue and expenses at a summary level for your review. As I typically point out and is highlighted on both the revenue and expense reports you have, a fiscal year to date in terms of where we are at. And so when we look at March, and we're really looking at the February revenue and expense reports, you'll notice that we are at about 50% for both, but yet we're 7 months into the year. So it just is how our expenses fall and how our cash falls throughout the year. Any questions relative to the revenue and expense reports? Outside of a forthcoming dashboard before Commissioner Ardrey retires from the board.
Won't be here long enough.
Okay, seeing no comments. Is there a motion to move it to the full board for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. All right, next, information on the March 2025 debt issuance. I'll just stop there.
Okay, nope, very good. So you'll recall at the last meeting, we had Attorney Tom Griggs, who's the district's bonds counsel, as well as myself, present and give you an overview of our 2025 debt issuances. We have broken that up to recap into two issuances. The first is a refunding of the bond anticipation note. We're going to see that in just a little bit. So we refer to that as 2025A, and then we have 2025B, and that is the balance of the $151.8 million. Of course, we always talk about our priorities as a district: student excellence, staff excellence, operational excellence, and community partnerships. If you look at kind of means goals, ends goals, you know, community partnership, I would say, is a community support, and we certainly thank the community for the support of both the operational as well as the facilities referendum. That helps us with our operational excellence, right? And then hopefully that leads towards student excellence. So this is a short slide deck. I hope you appreciate that, but there's a lot of detail even related to this one slide within the deck. I referenced earlier, we have a 2025A general obligation promissory notes that we issued, and actually the closing for that, I'm getting ahead of myself, is the last bullet point there, April 9th, but those bonds were sold, I believe, on or about March 3rd. It is a refunding of our bond anticipation note, and just to recap for the committee's pleasure, as well as perhaps those who are listening, the bond anticipation note, you can think about it as a little bit of a bridge note until we issue the actual bonds. We do have expenses we incur, and so before we go to the bond process, because we want the best market to issue bonds in, so that's why we do the bond anticipation note, that bridge, if you will, before we issue. So this first issuance is a refunding of the bond anticipation notes of $12.5 million. Keep in mind throughout this process, bond buyers, which are typically institutional buyers, at times are interested in paying a premium for the bonds. Now, if you were to sit there and ask Mr. McCray, what is the benefit of a potential bond buyer paying premium? I will tell you, I have no idea, but it is in their best fiscal interest, and it does help us out as a district. And so then the bond premium for this first issuance was just under $100K, $942,000 and change. That's good for us as a district. If you were to look at the paperwork, and keep in mind when we go through the process, I'm signing things, President Murray is signing paperwork, and as well as Board Clerk Commissioner Paul. If you were to pull the bond, you would see it's a 5% interest rate, and you're going to go, holy smokes, that's kind of high in today's marketplace. And I'm going to say, well, 5% is probably fair, but the premium discounts that percentage rate, and that's to the advantage of the bond buyer. So think of it as buying points conceptually within your home mortgage. All right, so really the premium reduces the rate to approximately 3.26%. Right, so that's a very good rate. But if you were to pull the actual bond, the bond will say 5%. All right, we will be taxing 5% interest rate on that, but the bond premium helps us out to really net out the cost to where it's still 3.26%. So the bonds that were issued were really only valued at $11.9 million. When you add in the bond premium, the premium buys that bond down as well as pays, if you will, for the closing cost, such as the cost of issuance and attorney fees and other associated fees. So the delivery date or the actual closing will be April 9th, 2025. That's what we did a few weeks ago related to 2025A. Just yesterday, 2025B went to market, and just literally within the last hour, we received the final paperwork for that closing. So it's not completely full because I wanted to, it's a little bit of my klutzy day today, get the information to you in paper form, but I can tell you we issued $139.3 million of general obligation notes. It went out to market, as I referenced just yesterday. We closed today. We received approximately $7 million in bond premium, and the interest rate is just over 4.21%. So that's good for us as a district. And just as a reminder, relative to interest rates, we modeled in terms of the impact of the borrowing 5.25%. So we're settling nearly 1% less than what we are, or what we originally forecasted. Now, I think you all appreciate the fact that transparency and clarity is what we try to achieve with the committee and the board. It is not a cost savings because it was a model. It's a cost avoidance for us. But had we incurred that, it would have been approximately 19 million more that we would be taxing, but we're not. Right, so it'll still be approximately 81 cents on the mill rate relative to this particular combined borrowing, right? But we modeled 5.25. Right, it's coming in a point or more less than that. Again, not a savings, it's a cost avoidance. All right, so Commissioner Ardrey, yes, sir.
Well, just as a taxpayer, what does that mean?
No, that's a great question. So while it essentially shortens, if you, not shortens in terms of span, right, but it does, if you will, reduce the borrowing, right? So we're at 5.25, it's not a savings, right? It's, we'll say, we'll just round up to 4.21%. So it's still 81 cents, but what factors into, and to get to really the gist of Commissioner Ardrey's question, right, is there are other factors when we consider our debt payments. One, there's an aid factor, right? So we always factor in the aid because this is an aidable expense for what we're taxing and paying on both principal and interest. It also, we have to consider is, unlike perhaps a car payment, is the structure of our debt over the 20-year borrowing will vary from year to year. So to some extent, we front-loaded, if you will, the premium that you see in this 2025B. Not the entire 7 million, it's probably going to be closer to 5 million because there are closing costs. And I'm rounding, so please bear with me on the ish here at the moment, right? So what we will do is we will take that premium, we'll record that as revenue, and then we will apply that premium towards debt service. It can only be used toward debt service to level out the initial bump up. You may recall, probably a really long answer, right? But you may recall when we're looking into the future is we have to not only consider this referendum that passed, our operational referendum, but potentially future referendums as well. So again, we're trying to take the 151.8, spread that out over 20 years, apply the premium, right? And again, we modeled a high interest rate, it's less, but we're still around 81 cents, and it has to do with the fluctuation of that loan amount over time. It's not a flat rate, such as a car payment. It's $400 for the next 48 months, right? It's just as structured because we wanted to do that again intentionally, knowing we will have, the board may potentially consider questions in the future. Sorry, very long answer. It's school finance, right? So it's never crystal clear. You don't seem satisfied with that answer.
Just so, we're borrowing less money, paying it back in a quicker term, or it has no impact on that at all?
So when we put it all together, we are technically borrowing less money, particularly with the 2025A issue, which you'll notice is 11.9. But we still have costs associated with the 12.5 ban because we use that for a period of time. So there are accrued interest costs relative to the 12.5. And that's where we're taking a portion of that premium to also pay down those accrued interest costs. But the actual bonds being issued are 11.9 in 2025A. The balance, the 139.3, is a little bit different in that we're not applying premium to the 139.3. We are essentially issuing 139.3 million, but the premium, rather than buying it down immediately, is we're paying and applying towards payment. This is where also we do lean into our experts at Griggs Law Office, right? We lean into our experts at Baird, and we lean into, if you will, to some extent, the people, the institutional investors who are buying our bonds, right? So that's why I'm not necessarily so well versed in terms of the advantageousness of purchasers paying premium, but it does benefit us as a district.
Okay.
It's getting warm up here.
Any further questions for Mr. McCray on this particular topic?
So one of the things, and I'll follow up a little bit, so what we currently don't have, right, and sorry, this thought just came to me, right, is now that we're settled, all right, is we were modeling, we'll say, what we call debt service charts, right, to where we can see our annual payment on principal and interest, right? So we still have a model because we just landed today, we'll say, on 2025B at 4.21%. So we have a general construct. Once those are available, right, we will share those, and so you'll be able to see the illustration a little bit in terms of the staggering, as well as we'll say the aid implications, right, the 81 cents in year one, right, and then how that really works throughout the balance of the loan.
I anxiously look forward to that.
April 15th.
All right. No further questions. Moving on. Update on the voter-approved November 2025 facilities referendum. Once again, Mr. McCray.
So a couple things. There's not a slide deck for this, so you'll be thankful for that. I actually, if you want to pull out this document here, it is a blank document. Well, obviously, there's words on the page, right, but there's nothing filled in. And we did that somewhat intentionally. And we'll explain in just a little bit as everyone catches up as to why it is blank. I actually have two copies of this document. One is populated, the other is not. So let me take you through this document, if I may. Great, I think everyone has it, awesome. So as you read the top there, as you'll see, if you will, kind of different building systems. And think of this as software systems, right? We have our camera system, we have our door access for our fobs, which is essentially our card access system. What we currently don't have, but we're investigating, right, is our time door system. And I may have mentioned this to you in the past. I see Mr. Millard shaking his head. Is right, like currently, maybe I mentioned this at the board meeting, right, is you kind of have to walk around with a key or an Allen wrench after the bell rings to secure our student entry doors. So we have very capable staff. We have staff who are at the entrance who are not necessarily our facility staff. We are monitoring those doors, but there is still a manual operation to that. What many districts do, right, is that is actually on a time sequence. So if we want the doors to open up at 7:50 and close at 8:05, we are still staffing those doors, but rather than walk around with an Allen wrench or a key, right, those doors would automatically go into a closed or locked feature. Right, so that's what we do not have, but that's what we aspire to have in the future. Right, so then we also have at the main door, as you entered in, like you press the little button, there's the little camera, that's what we call our airphone, right, so that is kind of a system in and of itself as well. Right, we also have, if you will, paging systems, and we have our clocks and our messaging system. So our messaging system right now is audible. If you were to go into a new constructed or a renovated school building, you would actually see a audible but also a digital display of that messaging system. Right, so when we had the opportunity to tour Granite Ridge, a Monona Grove Elementary School, it's Craig Clements, myself, Julie accompanied us, and Dave Leader as well. I don't think Brian, our director of IT, was able to accompany us on that visit, but we were able to see that type of feature, right? So that's very interesting to us. The overhead paging, right, is not a component of this particular referendum, right? So that's something that we have to begin to think about and see if we cannot wrap that in, right? So, but that's a feature. There's someone has to be in charge of that. Someone has to program it according to the particular, we'll say, safety measure we happen to be in at a particular point, if any at all. All right, we also have our BAS, or our building automation system, which controls our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So we are currently moving from Andover to Tritium Niagara. That's what we're implementing and have been implementing as we've worked through the process, still using some 2020 referendum dollars. And then as we move forward with our mechanical upgrades as part of this referendum, the new operating system, we're moving away from pneumatics, right? Think of pneumatics as kind of the old compressor and air, right, to more of a direct digital control or DDC system. Right, so to control the DD system, the direct digital control, is we need a software to do that. That's the building automation software. Right, so we have that. And then also a feature of that software, right, and Mr. Millard may remember this from his staff days, is probably somewhere in the basement of our schools, right, is a little box similar to your Christmas tree light timer, right, where we set parking lot timers. right? Well, the world has changed, right? So we should actually be able to automate that and integrate that into our building automation system as well. Right? So these are just how are we moving into the 21st century, right? And then, of course, we have our fire alarm system. So we have lots of building systems. And when we look at building security, we have to ask ourselves, right, are these all individual platforms, or is there an integrated solution that we can apply? Right, so this Friday, we'll be meeting with our third of 3 vendors at a potential integrated solution, particularly on our security elements. Right, so I think today, Julie and I was a little bit late attending another meeting, but Julie was in a very raucous 2-hour meeting relative to a particular vendor. We had about a 2-hour meeting a few weeks ago, almost a month ago, I should say, relative to an integrated solution for our building security, and then we have one coming this Friday. So you go, okay, well, how many users do we have? Like, who all is at the table when it comes to these types of systems? And that's what you'll see going down the left side of the paper, right? So we have an IT component, a facilities component, a human resources component, a building level component, right? So think of what rights, if any, does the main secretary have at a particular building relative to these systems. We'll not have access to them all, but there may be some systems that individual, such as the camera system, would want to have access to. Our school resource officer is the same, right? As well as, if you will, Kim Perenboom, right, drew the short card, so to speak. And so she is kind of our de facto safety director and works closely with Craig Clements, right, who is our security consultant, our former school resource officer from Parker, who really gives us a lot of guidance, not only related to the security components of our system, but also just our emergency responses at the building level. So we have lots of players, lots of different software, and do we want all standalone systems, or do we want to at least reduce the number of systems we have to a manageable bundle? There's not going to be one platform that does it all for us. Right now, some of our platforms will say we can do your building automation systems, and we can do door locks, and we can do card access. But are you really good at it? So sometimes I view it as, and I'll go back, and I'm dating myself, and maybe some on the committee would appreciate this, is do we buy components or do we buy a rack stereo system? You get the old Pioneer rack system, or you get the Harman Kardon speakers and the Kenwood receiver and so on and so forth, right? So how do we look again at all these different systems to where they're manageable, right? And so that's really also, I would say, the next question is we have lots of sophisticated systems that we'll be considering from an integrated solution standpoint. Some, such as our fire alarm system, are not necessarily high maintenance, but still need to be attended to. Between security and our building automation system, like those are 2 significant systems that we're still in the, we're in the 20th century. We really need to migrate more towards the 21st century. And then who owns that? And who's going to be the administrator? And then who's going to be the user? So lots of things for us to work out. So this is some of the things that we're working on. Right, I know Superintendent Holzman gives you an update, right? That'll be probably part of another update. And speaking of updates, we'll be asking our friends from both JP Cullen and EUA to kind of come back, right, and present, if you will, an update in terms of some of the work that they're doing. So we probably have at times from 12 to 14 people who are working on our district. Not necessarily all 40 hours, but as you heard from Superintendent Holzman, there's a lot of kind of field measurement and verification. Right, we have engineers who are working, we'll say, even on this building and Jefferson and Wilson in terms of what the appropriate mechanical solution will be. Right, this last Friday, a representative from UA was meeting with both Chris Lau, principal at Parker High School, as well as Allison Beyond at Craig High School, taking you tours, again, continuing to go through, we'll say, the measurement and verification. So prior to that visit this last Friday, as you may recall, I provided an update in terms of we spent some time at Nicolay High School, right? So Principal Lau was not able to attend, but Principal Beyond was. Following that visit, that site visit, is we spent a lot of time, probably about another 3 or so hours at EUA, talking through some potential draft plans in terms of door placement. And there were 2 meetings prior to that. So we've actually had 4 meetings relative to just door placement. And when I say door placement, not necessarily, okay, is it a foot off the corridor or 2 feet? We're getting to that point. We're still in schematic design, but more of, does it make sense to compartmentalize or segment here or there? So those have been about the 4+ meetings we've had, both here, at Nicolay, EUA, and then virtually. And so again, we're also looking at our security solutions. So that's kind of what's going on. Any questions? The good news is Julie is here and she'll be speaking as well. So it won't just be me today.
Next topic. You ready to move on?
Yep. Is there a slide deck?
So, are we ready for 1.7? Moody's rating?
Okay, sorry, the other one that said Moody's.
Okay, next up, information on the district's March 2025 Moody's rating. Mr. McCray.
So I know included in your packet, say this is how my day's going. It's not helping either Commissioner Gasper, Patrick Gasper or Denise out very much. So you had, I believe, the Moody's rating. So we are an AA2 rating. You also had a comparative in terms of where we rank within the school districts of Wisconsin that are rated by Moody's. Right, so we're in the upper tier for that. So that's good for us. Our rating prior to this most recent ratings call was an AA2. Right, so we didn't move. Right, but you also saw the analysis of the Moody's rater, for lack of a better term. Right, so it kind of gives you an idea. And then there was the questionnaire. So that questionnaire is actually what the ratings individual took us through and answered. Right, so I want you to, and hopefully you spend some time taking a look at that questionnaire, right, because what it really does is ask questions to where as a committee and as a board and as a district, we have positioned ourselves well. And I'll just give you an example, is we are making contributions in a positive manner to our Fund 73 liability, our other post-employment benefit liability. We are making positive contributions to our Fund 46, which is our long-term capital maintenance fund. We are making positive contributions, although probably not as much as we would like, but it's not a bad thing, right? In that we're not spending millions and millions to fund balance, right? Because this means essentially we have a relatively lean budget, but we are making contributions to our overall fund balance rather than drawing from our fund balance. So as a district, we are making financially sound decisions. The other factors that come into play is the overall community economic environment. You know, what's the average median, or the median, if you will, household income? What are employers like within the community? It also takes a look, if you will, at our enrollment growth or lack thereof. And our enrollment has been slowly going down, but it's not dramatically going down. So when you go back to what are those Wisconsin school districts that have a better rating than ours? And again, we are stable. We have a very good rating. Those who have a better rating, and I'll just kind of go up I-3990, right? Are you in Dane County? Dane County is an enormous economic engine. They have growth within their student population for the most part. So they most likely are, if they're doing the right things fiscally, have a bit of a higher rating than we do. I mentioned Nicolay earlier and Whitefish Bay and perhaps some of those northern suburbs, right? Those are also, if you will, affluent suburbs, right? Their enrollment is doing relatively well. So these are all factors that go into the mix when Moody's evaluates us. So you'll see the report is from an individual. That individual actually is the individual who does the question and answer, right, with me on the phone. Matt Sylvester Knutson participated. Mike Clark from Barrett also participated, right? But then she takes and makes a case to a committee. And it's really the committee who makes a decision in terms of our bond rating. Right, so that's just a quick snippet in terms of what all goes into the ratings call, what's being asked, right, which is again reflective of the district's decision making as well as the district's community. And then it goes before a panel, and then we're good to stay at AA2. This is actually the next agenda item, I believe. We're good. Any questions? Commissioner Ardrey?
I say from the scorecard, the rating would have been AA3. And I can only assume as a silver tongue, it went up to a AA2? Or what drove that? Do you-
Yeah, so again, as I shared in my brief discussion with Amy upon receiving that. So what happens, and let me get to the gist of your question, is it goes, so Amy has her analysis. I kind of dined Amy out, I guess, right? So the Moody's analyst performs her particular analysis, right? Goes before the panel, right? Presents the case. Right, so then it's that panel that kicks it back. So we were AA2, and you're correct. If you read through the detail, it's like maybe we were on the cusp, right? So we have to, I think, say, okay, well, we maybe got left at AA2, which is good, rather than us dropping to an AA3. Right, I think, when we look at, again, we're not a growing district, but we're not a falling district. And giving this some thought, if you think, so what if we still had General Motors? Right, what if we also still had diversity within our economic base? We perhaps could have been a little bit stronger and maybe not, if you will, begin to look like we were moving into an AA3. Sometimes what happens, right, you say, well, what control do we have over, economics outside the School District of Janesville, right? We probably don't have a great deal, right? But what, thankfully, as a committee and as a board, we do have control over is our decisions. Because I will tell you, if we were not contributing to our Fund 73 at above what we're scheduled to contribute, if we were not contributing to our Fund 46, if we were not contributing and spending out of fund balance, right, those would be bad economic decisions, bad fiscal, I suppose, policy decisions for us as a district. But we've made, and you've made as a committee and as a board, the correct decisions.
Maybe something you have no idea, but the rating I know goes into when the bonds go out to the market. And then I'm just wondering then how does that get factored into the premium? And it may not at all, or it may be, well, just noticing that the, A2 versus A3 is a significant positive difference for us. So I don't know if that gets factored in there or.
Yeah, that's a great question, and perhaps if Mike Clark from Baird comes back, just to ask in terms of the premium, if the credit rating has an impact on premium, or if it doesn't, and to what extent. You'll notice, and I believe this is where I thought you were going, Commissioner Ardrey, right, is in the right side, right, of that handout in terms of rankings. You'll see what happens when you move between various levels within your bond rankings. There's at least a minimum of 10 basis points. Think of 10 basis points as 0.1%. So it does have an impact.
You answered my follow-up questions. Any other? Susan?
Sure. It says here that there was a total of 163 districts rated in this particular graph. And since we have over 400 districts in Wisconsin,
Right.
what criterion leads us to this graph?
Yeah,
What are they doing?
Sorry, that's a great question. And so keep in mind, there's Standard & Poor's as a rating agency, and there's Moody's as a rating agency, right? In council with Baird, we feel as though Moody's will probably give us perhaps the better rating, right? Now, again, it's not as though better in terms of, but it's just, I think, their format in terms of how they evaluate districts and provide the rating. So there are, to your point, 421 school districts. This particular Moody's, we'll say, is doing about 160. There's another balance, we'll say, to Standard & Poor's. We weren't looking at the Standard & Poor's ratings. Again, a bit of a different rating schedule. Also keep in mind, if as a district you've not issued debt or have had no need to issue debt, you've not asked for a ratings call. Right? So now a lot of people are doing work. Right? There's over $900 million on the April 1st ballot. There are 32 school districts. So Oshkosh is asking, as an example, right, for 197 point something million dollars. That's their second question in a 5-year period. Their first question was for 107 million. And keep in mind, I often refer to Oshkosh because I believe they're very similar to us in Janesville. Right, so, you know, I don't know when the last time we'll say Fontana, you know, just outside Lake Geneva, or Williams Bay. You know, I know they did a number of projects well over a decade ago. They may not have done anything recently to issue debt, so therefore they don't need a ratings call. But we know Edgerton, Evansville, Beloit Turner, Milton, Fort Atkinson, Whitewater, I think Edgerton, if I didn't say Edgerton, Stoughton, like a lot of districts in the area have, but it's a big state. As you referenced, 421, they're not all asking for ratings calls.
Seeing no further questions. Moving on, update of the fiscal 25-26 budget development process.
No. Did we skip an agenda item, or is that really the next one?
That is the next one. Capital maintenance is after that.
Okay,
Which one do you need there, Dan? There's 3 here. This one?
What is this budget update?
there you go. High-level budget planning.
There we go.
Yep. Okay, the next agenda item, Julie and I get to share a little bit. Once again, reframing our 4 priorities. So we're always trying to look to how do we align, right, our mission, our vision, our values, our priorities with our budget. Right? And there's not necessarily a plug-and-play solution to that. It's really about a process, and most likely it's a process over time. You've seen a number of these slides before, but I'll quickly recap just in case someone from the viewing public has not. Is our budget assumption is per pupil aid will remain at $742. Membership will remain stable. Revenue limit authority will remain at an increase, or will remain at 325. I think this will be year 3 of the 400-year moratorium at that value. Our revenue limit ceiling remains at 11,000. That's the low for us. Will actually be at 11,325. So we would add another 325 to 11,325 we currently have. And we're anticipating categorical aid, special education remaining at 30%. It's just actually a little under that. You may recall that as some certain pot of money. If all districts' expenses go up, that's less of a pot for us to share. So there is no, we will fully fund at a percentage. It is a some amount. We anticipate our expenses, CPIU-based wages 3. Most likely we'll see approximately 2.5% in movement. Health insurance, we were forecasting to move up 12.5%. Right, that's a very dynamic topic at this moment. Dental insurance, we were forecasting at 5%. We just received an update about that today. That is not factored into the slide deck. Student transportation, 4%. Simply because it's CPIU plus 1, so we know what that is, so it's going to be 4%. And then 4% increase in utility costs, and that's really just taking a look at the data and forecasting how that has trended over time. Commissioner Ardrey.
So just for clarity going forward, the known items that we have here where they're no longer assumptions, if we may want to color those something different as known.
Very good.
So I think that would just stick out a little bit more. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. So, speaking of the different colors, you've seen this before, and so you'll notice some items in a lighter blue, such as health and dental insurance increases. And I highlighted in blue simply because, right, that is still very dynamic right now. If we look to our staffing increase, we are still working through our staffing model. Right, so that has, if you will, inched up over time because right now, again, we're receiving and we're evaluating. We're not necessarily determining as of today. Right, so when we look at the activities increase, right, so just also getting some good numbers, you may say, I thought that was 35,000. And you go, yep, that was the initial number, but with some consultation and with some work done by athletic director, district athletic director Jim McLaury, right, the first year startup cost for hockey is $75K. So when we begin to total everything up, and again, keep in mind there in red, you'll see a deduct of 990,000. That is essentially, again, a reminder about refinancing and paying off early, I should say, not refinancing, paying off early our Fund 38 debt, which frees up dollars within our revenue cap to be applied towards Fund 10. It's approximately 990,000. Right now, when we look at, is we're about 1.5 million in the hole. We're still early in the process. That number has gone up. Now, someone may say it's only 1%. Surely you can find 1% somewhere. 1.5 is a big number, even at 1%. But it's better than 2%. Right, but it is still a challenge. And again, as we work through our health insurance and our staffing, you'll begin to receive updates this month and early into next month as we look to make decisions regarding both of those two elements of the budget, right? We'll keep the board abreast. Questions on the high-level budget? If I may, we'll just go back to staffing, which is line 9 there, right? And I think everyone understands, right, staffing, particularly classroom instruction in support of the classroom, whether that's via a paraeducator or an individual such as in special education who is maybe not in that traditional core classroom every day, but supporting instruction relative to our most vulnerable population, right, that is our mission. So when we're looking at investments, we're looking at investments in our actual mission. So just, yeah, I know everyone understands that, but I think it's just also great to hear it. It's what I have to remind myself every day. So, questions relative to our high budget? Yes, ma'am?
I don't have a question, but I would just like to encourage our community to get involved with the state budget hearings on school funding. They will be, they're ongoing, and please get involved. Thank you.
I think too, as we look through, and thank you for that plug for the Joint Finance Committee open meetings relative to the overall state budget, but certainly to K-12. You know, sometimes it depends upon, you know, who you talk to. Certainly Superintendent Holtzman has the Wisconsin Association of School District Administrators. I have the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials. We're all part of the School Administrator Alliance, right? And so I think what I'm hearing through my peer group, today I'm skipping the very exciting accounting conference to be here with you today. Matt Sylvester Knutson is there. There will be a PEDIC legislative update, and it's mostly like, hold on, maybe movement in special ed, maybe movement in the low revenue limit ceiling, but it's not going to be all three things such as, you know, increase in the revenue limit amount, increase in the ceiling, increase in special ed. And most likely look forward to July. As a reminder, when we look at our budget development process, on July 1, we will receive an initial aid estimate, right, based upon the adopted budget and actually budget revisions throughout the year, because we're always communicating with the DPI, but they're forecasting our eligible expenses for aid to calculate that aid payment, potential aid payment. It's a July 1st aid estimate, right? And then shortly in July, I think we only have one board meeting, right? We'll be looking at that preliminary budget adoption. So it's kind of what our next few months look like. July's not really, sadly, that far off.
I think to chime in and thank Susan for the note about to the community, and I would say as we approach election of 3 school board members, any connection that you may have with those running, and just given where we're at and when they enter to sit here with us, it's important that they're up to speed as much as they can be. So several of the candidates have reached out to me, and I've spent time with 3 of them, going over as much as they asked of me. So, I mean, I'm trying to but I've offered it up to all 6. 3 of them had either asked before I offered or after I offered, so. And it isn't like I know any more than Mr. McCray, but from a board's perspective, I can share that or do my best to try to share that, so. Just so you, oh, go ahead.
You know, I think too, right, so Commissioner Ardrey makes an excellent point there is, you know, certainly not my intent or Matt's intent or Julie or Dave's intent, right, to make you subject matter experts in our respective disciplines, right? Our role is to hopefully provide you with some good information to keep the conversation at a 30,000-foot level, right? No one is going to hopefully walk up to you and say, so can you tell me what the district's position is on the tertiary aid level? Right? No one's going to ask you that, right? But yet we hope you will say, I know we are a positively aided district, right? So for every additional dollar, right, we were able to receive 22 cents, right? So every new dollar in spending, right? And you may even say, whoa, slow down there, my friend, right? But we want you to feel comfortable with the topic. That's why we spend a lot of time, sometimes very lengthy meetings going over in detail. We also want you to know that there are great resources on our website, right? And if you have a question, right, whether it's myself, Matt Sylvester Knutson, Tammy Carlson, relative to finance, whether it's Dave and Julie are on facilities or student nutrition with Liz and her team, right? We want you to feel very comfortable about having a good base of knowledge and then always reaching out if you need additional detail. Commissioner Paul reached out relative to independent charter schools and voucher schools. I think you maybe got copied on the response in mass, right? That's a great question, right? We want to share that data. Again, not to make you business experts, right? But to be informed. And that's, I think, part of our goal, transparency, but actually hopefully providing some clarity.
Thinking additionally, as we look at, what can we do? I mentioned the candidates, but also State Representative Ann Rowe. As she's on with your talk show with Tim Brimmel that gets out to the community. So she asked me a bunch of questions and I connected her with Dan and she subsequently asked me follow-up questions. But really, because some of the questions may come about the school district and we don't necessarily, not that we try to control the message, but we're not the ones sharing the message. So those people that have the opportunity to share a message, we want it to be what we want it to be. So it's best that we can connect and prepare them the better we are. So I won't belabor that point. All right, next. All right, opportunity for someone else to speak. Information on planning updates on the district's long-term capital maintenance plan. Mr. McCray and team.
Right, so Julie will be joining. I have a few introductory slides. We're going to turn it over to Julie. You'll see throughout the slide deck a photo, and I think it is in your packet, but that photo represents why Dave Leader is not here with us this afternoon. So, a lot of times, and Superintendent Holtzman and I have this discussion as well as we do at the directors, is we can get really granular with the data, right? But there's a story in the data, and the data hopefully represents the mission. And so when we look at our mission, right, we can see the faces on the youth that you see on the screen that's projected, right? So that is our future. That is, future educators, future dentists, future laborers, future trades folks, right? That is our future. We hate to really, if you will, talk about economic development, right? But it's kind of to some extent what we do, right? Is we want a really good literate workforce, right? In our community, in our country. When you look at, are they engaged, right? They're watching something there, right? And that. There's just stories. Each one of those children have a story to tell. Their parents probably have a story to tell. And again, we're talking about tertiary aid and we're talking about long-term capital investment and we need to have those discussions. But those discussions are truly in support, right, of our community and our mission. Quickly review today's, if you will, agenda, our topics. We'll review the approved referendum, the capital planning phases, the calendar. Context is going to be important. Julie's going to talk about context. And then we'll do a very high-level draft review. It certainly, I serve at the pleasure of the committee. It was not our intent to go line by line for each school over the 10-year period. But there's a theme that we want to identify. And that's really, I think, our focus is really looking at themes. And then we do want to keep it in draft. I appreciate Commissioner Ardrey's counsel in terms of we're looking again at another draft. We started this discussion in December, right? So we're looking at it today. We want your feedback, either thematically or what have you, right? And then you'll see it again in April, kind of the final version. We would ask that you consider that version and at your pleasure, hopefully make a recommendation to put it to the full board for their review and approval at the second meeting in April. So Commissioner Lard, that's why I say you're not off the hook, right? 3 more meetings, 3 more times you're going to get to see this, if you will. So. You've seen again this slide deck before, February 2020. Perhaps we should spend some time before Commissioner Ardrey's retirement from the board to review what our facilities will be. Safe, acceptable, cost-effective, sustainable, adaptable, flexible, equitable. Right? I see Athletic Director McLaury. He probably is very thoughtful about these same themes. Equitable, I always, as an outdoor coach, wondered why my fields were not as good in another district as the indoor facilities, right? If you kind of think about equitable. Engaging and supportive, hopefully an element of community pride, and certainly code compliant. We probably have some things relative to ADA that are not, if you will, code compliant, but we have a grace period. But as we move forward our investments in our facilities, can we move into an ADA compliant environment? And again, Athletic Director McLaury and I had a conversation today relative to indoor bleachers and ADA accessibility, since they were installed in 1955 and approximately 1968-69 respectively. Again, this is something you've seen. I think we cannot thank our community enough for their investment in our facilities, but we had a process that we went through, and as we look forward to the future, we would probably see a very similar process. We want to be very thoughtful and intentional. Again, another slide you've seen before, but the district essentially saw in $934 million in need in both identified maintenance as well as improved learning spaces. Think of improved learning spaces, if you will, as capital improvement versus identified maintenance. We appreciate, again, the voters' $151.8 million approval, but that represents only 16.3% of the overall identified work. So when we begin to look at a 10-year capital maintenance plan, right, there's a lot of items to get through the gate. And we're not going to be able to get them all through the gate with the limited funds that we have. So breaking out that 151.8, 124.5 to address critical maintenance, 11.1 to improve some safety and security elements. We spoke about those a little bit earlier, and 16.25 million to improve special education learning spaces, and we'll focus on that word improvement. That kind of gets back to the educational adequacy of the space. It's not a maintenance item, it's an improvement item for us. I think back in January we shared, this is I think slide 4 of a multi-slide deck. And so really taking a look at, we know in 2024, the blue dot there, we passed a 14.5 million non-recurring operational referendum. We know we need to go back in 2026 and ask an operational question again. Certainly the structure of that has not been determined, but I believe what I had initially modeled was a 4-year question on either a recurring, non-recurring basis or blend thereof. It's yet to be determined, but we know we need to go back in 2026. And it's like running for Congress, we'll be back again. We know then 4 years later, assuming the board approves an administrative recommendation of a 4-year referendum question, right, that takes us to 2030, right? Commissioner Domerhausen will still be on the board. All right, so, but then you go, okay, what about our facilities? And this is what we shared, I think, back at a workshop as well as a committee meeting back in January, is we cannot most likely wait to address our pent-up deferred maintenance until past 2030. So should we consider, as a district and as a board, right? A potential facilities question in 2028. Keep in mind, there's no scope defined, right? There's no dollar value defined. We have some ideas based upon the survey that we shared with the community and the community responded to. So we know we have additional maintenance items. We know there's an interest in expanding or improving our career technical education space. We know there's educational adequacy space relative to, we'll say, our classrooms at Adams Elementary, Lincoln Elementary, Roosevelt Elementary, Monroe Elementary are still very similar to the years when those buildings were constructed. Is there an opportunity there to improve those learning environments? And then, of course, we have athletics. Right? So we have a substantial need relative to improving, right, our site-based athletic facilities. Keep in mind, we had 7.5 million as part of the 169.5 survey question, but we need to dial things back in order to hopefully achieve approval, which we did. So within that, we had approximately, again, 7.5 million in outdoor and indoor maintenance that we, not improvement, but maintenance that we needed to address. We pulled that out in hopes of having a successful question. And of course, we did. So those are, if you will, kind of three elements we really need to consider and refine over the next few years in order to prepare, at the board's discretion, for potential 2028 question. You say, okay, that's great. Let's talk about capital maintenance. Absolutely. Keep in mind, we had over $500 million in identified capital maintenance work. We shared this as well. And this is just kind of an encapsulation of the slide deck previously shared. So we need to refine, that's where we're at now, our 10-year capital out of our operating budget. We also know we have some other funding sources. We need to engage the full board. We spent some time at the committee level. We probably in the future should look at the feedback a little more in depth in terms of our 2024 community survey. As I referenced, we have to work through our scope, our prioritization, our costings associated with any potential work. We have to update our enrollment and community growth data. We'll do that again after the September 2025 third Friday count. And of course, as we've done, Superintendent Holtzman was very good at this, getting out into the community. Others as well, but not to the extent that Superintendent Holtzman was. And certainly we appreciated the board's endorsement in terms of a 9-0 and really supporting the process. Quick, so this is our calendar relative to, and we're leading up to Julie's time here. Dang it, right? Today's the 18th. March 18th, review the draft plan. April 15th, review the final draft plan. Request the committee to recommend, and then hopefully the board will recommend or adopt, if you will, the April 22nd, 2025 capital maintenance plan. Keep in mind, and perhaps a very technical point that I overlapped is, because we have a Fund 46, we need to have a 10-year capital maintenance plan. I believe the board adopted that in 2015. Shocker, it's 2025. The world has changed, our buildings have changed, we should probably update that plan. To some extent, not only is it good management, but it's kind of this little statutory obligations. I don't look good in orange, right? So we want to go ahead and have the board adopt that. Only on St. Patrick's Day, Commissioner Erdry. All right, so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Julie. She's going to kind of provide some context in terms of our work, but I see we have a question from Commissioner Johnson.
Once again, this is a comment and not a question. I just saw this morning that there has been a bill introduced into our state legislature that would want to eliminate operational referendums. So we definitely need our community to get involved in their state government. And we need to rally for our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
So good afternoon, Commissioners and Superintendent Holzman. I'm Julie Yerke. For those that do not know me, I am the district's facilities planner and project specialist. So I'm here today to give you a little bit of context on what our $1 million budget allocation for the capital improvement for the district really looks like in a personal perspective and something that each homeowner can relate to. So as I said, we have $1 million for a budget allocation annually, and that will come in just under 50 cents per square foot with the district-wide 2.1 million square feet across all of our 20 sites. So our elementary schools are approximately 966,000 square feet total, which equates to 36,500 annually per building that could be spent. We can move to middle schools as well, 525,000 square feet total, which is $80,000 annually per building to be spent on capital improvement needs. High school is the same thing, 663,000 square feet total, which is the equivalent of 150,000 annually per each high school. Then we can move on. Oops, what did I do?
You did, or someone did.
Somebody did? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to give a little context for the homeowners. Looking at Zillow, the February 2025 average home sale price was $267,800, and the average Janesville home square footage is 1,925. So you take our square footage that we get for capital improvement in the district, 50 cents per square foot, and that equates to approximately $960 of an annual contribution to our homeowners' capital fund. So that's only $960 that you would get as a homeowner to make improvements on your house. So two of the bigger items for a homeowner would be their HVAC system and roofing. So in today's dollars, we took an average of what it would look like. In today's dollars, it's about $8,000 to replace your HVAC system, about $20,000 for roofing. Again, these are pretty general numbers, and it's going to depend on, especially roofing peaks on your house, type of shingles you use, all of that. But we're just going to use some general numbers here today. So that is for a total of $23,000. When you only have $960 a year for those $23,000, the bigger purchases, it's going to take you 24 years to save to do those two big items. In the meantime, you can't do anything else. What if you have a leak, in your home? Or what if you want to do landscaping or any other big projects in your home? So this is equivalent to the district. We only have so much money. So would you just forego those projects? They just kind of pile up? Kind of just a question to think about where we're at and how it equates to where the district is at. So basically, we need to borrow to fund this gap. We have no choice. And as a homeowner, you probably would have to do the same if really all you had was $960 annually to do any repairs on your house. Major capital repairs, that is. So I thought it was important to share this, just to give a homeowner perspective on what this looks like for the district. Because when you look at the district's $1 million budget, that sounds like a lot of money. But when you equate it to the amount of square footage in our district, it really isn't. And when you can take it to a personal level for all of us, I think we can understand the concept a little better. Why do I keep doing this?
Thank you, Julie. I'm sure we'll maybe have Julie up again to provide some context. So hopefully that made some sense, right? I think Julie asked that question and there were no questions, so we'll assume that it did. I referenced earlier, this spring, April 1st, 2025, spring elections, although not necessarily as well participated, we certainly encourage people to get out to vote on April 1st, 2025, even though as a district we don't have anything on the ballot. But there are communities that do. I referenced there are 32 school districts just asking alone on debt or capital improvement referenda, over 953 million. And just the sampling of that is Oshkosh at 197.8. Arrowhead actually went in the fall and lost, reduced their ask to 136.2. Their scope has changed. Baraboo, 69.9 million. Whitewater, 30 million. Keep in mind, we are 5 times as large as Whitewater. Right? We are probably 3 times as large as Baraboo. Arrowhead is just a unified high school with under, I believe, 1,500 students. They have a number of K-8 feeders that move into Arrowhead. They have an aging infrastructure. And Oshkosh, as I referenced, is very similar to us. So we hope success for these school districts. So a little bit more, there's a 10-year planning document. What we want you to keep in mind is that active word of planning. It's not a plan. I mean, it kind of is a plan, but it has to be a very active document. I think I've shared with you in the past, right? Planning to fail is failing to plan, right? So it should be an active process throughout. It's not going in a 3-ring binder or in Dan's Excel file somewhere, in Julie's Excel file, Dave's Excel file, right? Because over time, our needs change. Priorities change. The infrastructure fails, and we need to make an additional investment. So we currently have Fund 46. That is under $10 million in terms of actual dollars today that we have. And we leveraged that 10 million. And we couldn't, for the first 5 years, Commissioner Johnson, spend any money. It really becomes, how are we putting money away for the future? We leveraged some of those dollars to complement the work that was ESSER funded at Franklin Elementary. Some of the work relative to our outdoor athletic facilities this summer, just nearly $250,000 is coming out of Fund 46. And then the old adage in facilities, if it's mechanical, it will fail. Nothing runs forever. And everything touches mechanical. So we're going to kind of review again at a high level. I'll probably ask Julie to come up and maybe answer some questions. She was really instrumental in talking through the process, putting the document together. We all had a helping hand. So last night we had this damage at Parker High School. So this is a air handling unit, rooftop somewhere on Parker's roof, right? So you'll see some of it draping to the right there, right? And we are exposure, right? It's an EDPM, which is a fully adhered roof membrane, not woof membrane, roof membrane, right? So the contractors are on site today. And we really want to attend to this as quickly as possible, at least from an interim measure, because of the precipitation we're expecting tomorrow, right? And so the roof membrane, right, is there to protect the equipment, which assists the building in operating. So that's why Dave is unable to join us. We work with a great contractor, Apex Building Consultant, right? And literally, this has been like 18 hours or so that this has all occurred, right? But this speaks to the fact that a system can fail today that we need to apply funds to, even though we perhaps had something on deck already to be tackled. It's not a static plan. It's a dynamic plan. So you have a document, right, a ton. The first page should really be a summary sheet. And again, we still have to spend some time with District Athletic Director McLaury. We have some things peppered in here, right? But keep in mind, what we've been sharing is we have a great deal of need, and we have a finite amount of resources, which, using the home illustration, is we don't always have money in our home budgets, right, for very large repairs. And so sometimes we have to go to a home equity loan in order to fund the repairs or the replacements that we need. And I would compare that to the referendum process. I think probably a year ago, if not a little bit more, we shared over the last decade. Again, Julie is instrumental in compiling that data in terms of the investments we have made outside of referenda. Now technically, like Commissioner Murray would remind us that they are all tax dollars. When we get dollars from the federal government, those are tax dollars, right? When we carry over dollars that we tax for locally and we carry them into Fund 46, those are tax dollars. State aid is tax dollars, right? So yes, we are an entity that receives tax dollars, but we are also leveraging those dollars as best we can. So we've been making Fund 46 investments. We've been taking advantage of ESSER. We have an operating line in our budget of just $1 million, under 50 cents per square foot. The average, as Julie shared with you, right, $36,000 a year at Adams Elementary as an elementary school does not carry us very far when we look at the physical plant and the roof section alone, which is over $500,000. Let alone the mechanicals, the tuck pointing, the parking lot, the asphalt, the brickwork, the lighting, the windows, just like you have in your home. And keep in mind, we have over 11,000 people between just staff and students in our buildings every day, let alone the visitors and the community use that our buildings experience. So there's a lot of usage, a lot of wear and tear. And I appreciate Commissioner Millard and his experience in our facilities department, right, because he can attest to that. If you have any questions, let alone just your own ability and need to walk through our buildings. So real quick, again, it's not our intent to go line by line, but what we're trying to do is illustrate we have $1 million every year. We are complementing over time what we have within Fund 46 to tackle. If you go back to our long-range facilities plan, it's those items 1 and 2, kind of the not dire items, but the items that need more immediate attention. 1s and 2s. So that's what we're using to populate this. We know we have a pent-up demand for CTE space and correct lighting. And roofing, we talked about roofing almost ad nauseum and the asset up there that we don't see, but yet is still very important to the daily lives of our students and our staff in our buildings. Right? Athletic space, lots and lots of needs. So rather than standing here and saying, we're spending $1 million every year, $10 million over the next 10 years, and we all leave happy because we spent $10 million. So Commissioner Ardrey and his guidance, as we've discussed this, right, is, yeah, we got a lot more demand. We need to show the deficit that we're incurring over time, which is essentially the need that we have. And yes, we're doing what we can with the 1 million, but there's just more and more need. Ergo, phase 1, and start planning for phase 2, and complementing that work in between with available funds that we have. So that's what we're really trying to illustrate here. And again, if right, this is the draft, this is kind of for your review, and we want you to think thematically, right? So does the theme make sense? Not, well, should we do roof section 2 at Parker, or should we do roof section 3 at Craig, right? So we really need to lean into our building consultant and his prioritization, our own boots on the ground to validate our consultant's review, right, to kind of figure out roof section 2, roof section 3, and prioritize accordingly. And we hope that's an acceptable approach to the committee. But again, your guidance, your counsel is certainly welcome.
Okay, I guess my question is, and I know we've been putting this $1 million away, I was there then. But every year, that same $1 million needs more.
Correct.
Needs more, if nothing more than inflation.
Correct.
Do we have some kind of a history that shows, since we've set that Fund 46 up, what we've needed it for over the years? That'd be, what, 10, 11 years now. And how much were we short each year, which would be the inflationary factor, most likely. We hope that's what it is, because certain things can fall in there quick. But somewhere to show to people how we have to grow that every year. We have to grow it at the minimum in inflation part, not to compensate for storms or other things. And that, so I'm trying to say, how do we show the public a picture of the needs? We've taken care of it on 2015 values.
Right.
We need to get up to 2025 values as such, just inflation and how much additional would be needed. I know we're trying with the maintenance and all the other things.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, how do we paint a picture better?
Yeah, that's right. That's our challenge, right? And I appreciate you, working through that challenge with us. So just a couple of factors there. So keep in mind when we fund Fund 46, it's just with any remaining dollars that we have available at the end of the year. So I think last year, fiscal year 24, right, we put approximately $250,000 into Fund 46, so not a substantial amount. What we've tried to do over the years, right, is budget operationally about $1 million. Right, but the challenge, and we'll say pre-Fund 46, and the ability to exercise Fund 46 after that 5-year period, right, is our cycle, I would say, is off. Right, so simply because we're trying to do roofs, right, you have to line up your roof contractors in October, November of the preceding roofing season, right, to get them. And sometimes we weren't able to do that, which maybe meant we had some more dollars than $250,000 to put away. Right, so it sometimes gets into, were we fully funding that $1 million? I would say we are, but sometimes like we just have dollars left over. Keep in mind, when we have dollars left over at the end of the year, we have unfilled positions. We have, not everyone will say is here every day, so we may have a dock day, right? So these are things that, if you will, fuel that. We also don't budget to the penny for utilities, so we have lots of streams, if you will, coming into those unspent funds. And over time, we've gotten better. Right, because our budgeting process has gotten better, right? OPEB obligation, Fund 46, and also do we put dollars into our fund balance to keep pace with board policy. So what we tried to do, and just to kind of scratch your memory brain, Commissioner Darmerhausen, is when we looked at the 10-year plan or 20-year plan for roofs, is we put in a 4% inflationary factor for the outstanding balance of roofs. We haven't necessarily done it with this capital plan, right, other than the roofing components, right? Because, we could, it's just going to make the numbers look even redder. And I think we're trying to illustrate red numbers, right? We could certainly apply that. It just will be more red over time. When we go back to the long-range facility plan, and again, just to kind of tickle the memory, right? And when we looked at $940 million, right, there was only about a 2-year inflationary value to that. We took it through 2026. So if we assume it's $940 million in 2026 dollars, right, it's going to be even more, right? And this is where what you don't do now will just cost you more in the future. So the $7.5 million that we deferred out of athletics, the items we didn't do in CTE or educational spaces, right, or more maintenance, is just more in the future, to your point. Did I answer your question? Kinda? And okay.
Reviewing the draft. I guess my question would be, as we've identified in total $578 million in maintenance. And we didn't calendarize that by year, what that spending would be. But one of the questions that come to mind is, we identified that. Fortunately, the community said yes to the referendum that included a level of maintenance. How does that factor into this picture? So maybe another way of saying it, if we looked at, I'll fast forward, 26, 27, we know we'll be spending referendum dollars that year. And do those dollars decrease the $23.4 million that's shown on here? Or is that in addition? Or just how does that factor into this picture as a whole?
Yeah. Thank you very much. That's a great question. And the answer is the latter point you made. So we are not factoring into this plan any of the referendum work. Right, so this is really outstanding balance work that we're looking to address. So when we're tackling, we'll say that 124.5, if memory serves me correctly, in maintenance of the 151.8. Remember, we have special education, we have safety and security. So when we look at that 124.5, that is not in this 10-year plan because we're addressing that. Right, so this is things that didn't make the cut. parking lots, softball fields, baseball fields, right? Roof sections, right? Particularly as we move beyond 2020, we'll say into 2027 for roof. I think we have 25 and 26 covered for roofing. Julie's giving me a nod, yes, right? Now, there is work identified, right, as part of that long-range plan that is feathered in as well. Right, again, is it roofing? Is it a water distribution system? Right, we'd have to go through the detail, but we reference those documents that our consultants provided. So keep in mind, a civil site athletic was point of beginning, right? EUA, JP Cullen worked closely, so we have those great resource documents. It's those resource documents in terms of a dollar value, sans the inflationary aspect, Commissioner Darmerhausen, that we're using to populate.
So maybe I would encourage the next view of this, and hopefully it's not too onerous to say, here's the full picture. And of the full picture of maintenance needed, thank you, community, for and I'll just say 125 that we're covering. Here's what's left over. Because that gives maybe it's just me, it gives an annual view of really what's needed. Mm-hmm. And we see what part that we are covering. Without that being shown here, it still leaves the big question is, well, didn't we just pass a referendum to cover some of this?
Sure.
So then if we could show that in here, that would be great.
Nope, very good. Thank you for that feedback.
And then as much as practical, what we called 578, I'll say in $26, is now 800 million as we move out.
Right.
Then, not necessarily factored in that way, but speaking to that might be a little bit more. So ultimately the 10-year, and I guess what I'm getting at is the 10-year plan that I want to review has everything in it from a dollar perspective, including what we've passed referendum-wise, what we envision. We won't necessarily say phase 2, 3, 4, 5, because whatever that looks like, but what does that look like? And then might be a 10-year plan that has everything in it, or it may be 10 years covers up through phase 2A, and then when we update it next, it'll include the next phasing. So just as a thought, I don't know if that makes sense to my other committee members. Okay.
Great, good feedback. Thank you very much.
I like it.
Any comments on format and breakdowns or any of that? I will say nice work to get to where we're at. It's awesome. I understood it.
Yeah, thank you again. A team approach, Dave Leader, Dave Farwell, Julie, myself, right? Again, the good work our partners did in terms of setting the stage and capturing a lot of data. Certainly feedback from Athletic Director McLaury, even some additional forthcoming feedback from Athletic Director McLaury. So I think too, right, and again, it kind of goes back into that planning process, because we don't want to, this is addressing maintenance, we don't want to forget about the educational adequacy, right? Our career, and this is a 10-year maintenance plan, right? But even the discussions we're talking about, right, and it's give you a little bit of the glimpse into the future, right? If the board wants to entertain a November 2028 question, right, it's 3.5 years away, right? August of 2028, the board at that time, should they so choose, would actually approve a question to be placed on the ballot, right? If you go back even further to kind of reverse engineer it, right, in June, most likely, the board's getting survey data from the community. That survey went out in April, right? You get back to March and February and January, right? It's kind of a culmination, synthesization, if you will, of a lot of data, right? Administrative input in terms of preparing a consideration for the board, right? And that, if you will, is 2027. Right, so even now, kind of talking about what does our space look like? I'm not saying we start tomorrow, but I think Superintendent Holtzman would attest, this has been on our docket. Like, there are a lot of things we attend to, but talking about the future planning, that very active process is part of it. So again, that's the educational adequacy space. You know, athletics, CTE, elementary, middle school classrooms, high school classrooms. Our science labs in our high schools, right, are dated. That's the educational adequacy. Right? Not that English classrooms are not, right, but we want to be respectful of those core classes.
Yeah, I want to see if I have this straight. Our operational funding really runs out after 2026. Is that correct? You just extended it 2 years. Is it 27? I don't know. It's going to run out, though.
You are correct. It's just, so what was passed in November,
Yeah.
right? And so I may be walking a thin line here, going back to the operational.
I want to walk that line. We have to be honest with our
Right,
people.
as we're talking about long-term capital maintenance, right? But yes, if you think about the referendum cycle, let's talk about that because it relates to capital. We talked a little bit about capital. So this November of '24, the voters approved. That will take effect for 2 years, the 25-26 to 26-27.
Correct.
Yes.
So then for 27 and 28, we have to be prepared.
We have to be prepared, most likely for a November gubernatorial election date. Again, the board's discretion, but most likely the administrative recommendation to place a question come August of 2026 for November 2026 operational question, which would not take effect until July 1st of 2027.
Okay, so, and we probably, in my estimation, should be looking at making it permanent, not be out there every 2 years.
That was a comment, right?
That was my comment from me.
Not a question. That's all it was.
No, that wasn't a question, it's a statement.
Right, and absolutely, right, and it's always, right, and so trust me, right, Julie gave me a sign a number of years ago in my office, and it says professional overthinker, right, so I remember originally chatting with Superintendent Holtzman in terms of we don't know what the biennial budget's going to look like, right, we know we are asking for 14.5 million. I think as a district, we've established credibility that we need at a minimum 14.5 million. We knew we were refunding our Fund 38 debt, which again was giving us a little bit of a window into a new biennial budget cycle. Right, so that's why we asked for 2 years. We also wanted to break the cycle of asking for capital investment as well as operational in the same cycle. Needs don't go away, right? Operational referenda, as everyone knows, is the oxygen in the room that we need to breathe, and it's not enough. Going back to Commissioner Johnson's, comments earlier in the meeting in terms of CPI.
But we need to, that is a threat to us, as Commissioner Johnson has says, that we won't be able to ask for it if that passes.
I don't want to,
Speculate.
there are lots of bills that go out. We should always pay attention.
Oh, yeah.
We should always be aware. So when I get into that sign that I referenced earlier in terms of professional overthinker, right, there are lots of scenarios. So possible and probability come into play. We should never say dismissive, it'll never pass, won't have the votes, right? We have to think about it. I think I heard a comment even from the committee, right? Well, if this, then that, but we don't know. And if it just came out today, I think probably both Superintendent Holtzman and I have an SAA update in our email boxes, and we'll be able to read about that.
Going to southern Italy.
So,
You mean Sicily? Yeah.
so I thought where you were going with this, Carl,
Yeah.
is because of the identified $1 million of capital maintenance we have in our normal operating budget.
Right.
As we look to go, whatever we do referendum-wise, would we look to include more, to do more capital maintenance to cover some of these things that aren't being covered? So rather than $1 million, it might be 2.5 million of capital maintenance in a given year, and that might be where the increase was looking at. I thought that's.
It'd be
what you
worth
were
looking at,
that,
yeah.
so.
It is, I'm just trying to connect the different ends, and you did wonderful, thank you.
Right, so, and again, I appreciate Julie's, sharing, we'll say, that context, right? And again, and I'll stop talking, trust me, right? It's 4:30, right? I think I get 2 hours though, no. So I always joke, but I see lots of no's, right? I don't disagree with Commissioner Ardrey. There are things we need to look at. As we move through our safety and security components, right, we have a part-time individual, right, in addition to our great partnership with our school resource officers, really dedicated towards security within the district, right? We're probably a little bit behind there, right? When we look at our facilities, we know we're behind, right? When we look at our programming, right, there are great things that we offer our children. We can't do everything for our children, but what we do, right, it's kind of we're getting by, right? But really, when it comes to our educational goals, do we want to be better, right? Do we want to be next level? And so what are we looking to fund that? So remember, our referendum is a barely keep pace status quo with what we have. And we're always evaluating our programming, right? But our population is becoming a little more complex. Our student needs, our language learners, right? Preparing children for the workforce, preparing children for the college, preparing for jobs that are 10 years away, right? The kindergartners today, right? What are we looking forward to? And that's where Superintendent Holtzman's leadership and Dr. DeGrasse leadership and Chris and Kim and others come into play in terms of we're status quo with 14.5 million. We're status quo even if we go up a little bit over that. What's that next level? So we have our programming, we have our facilities, right? And we just got a lot. And $325 per student doesn't cut it.
Any further questions on this topic?
Continue.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan, Julie. Thank you. Next, future committee meeting items.
We have future meetings?
Well, yeah, future meetings, but just the items, and I have one.
Smart aleck.
And I know, and it really comes out of, I was contacted about potential naming of a particular soccer field and just asking what is the procedural way of addressing it. So I think from a topic standpoint, we want to review what our policy says today, if we have one. I know we have one. From a naming rights and review that. Do we need to adjust it? Even ahead of the actual ask, because I don't know if we have seen anything officially from an ask for us to respond to. So I would like to at least review that, if that makes sense. That's doable. Is April doable, or would May be a better time frame? May, June? I mean, this isn't, we have nothing before us at the moment. So at a time that it makes sense, I'm not necessarily saying April. Could be June, not July though.
So we have a number of policies as we transition from our current policy format to Neola that I'm looking, and I think administration is looking to bring forth to the board's consideration in April, and most likely maybe some in May. So if we could hold the April meeting relative to policy as well as other topics, such as the policy you mentioned, right? I think our next meeting would be April 15th. I hope that's not too taxing of a day for you all.
All right, Ted. Okay. So, any other topics? Yeah, it's already in With that, we will go with the calendar of agenda items, if you remember that from, I think, January or so. With that addition and anything else that comes up, including kind of the ultimately, what was the debt issuance? We'll get maybe a more formal, here's what that means or whatever by then, so. With that, I thank you all, and we are adjourned.
We didn't settle.